Curtis White. What a treat to have you here on Bike Talk with Dave, talking about all things cross because hashtag cross is coming or is cross here? What do you say right now? It's middle of August. Cross is here?
Cross is here. It absolutely is, Dave. Cross is out. I mean, for me, cross has been here for a while. Like I've been doing my preparation since middle of July. We were talking about this in the green room, but my prep is certainly underway, kind of making sure. And cyclocross is a very unique discipline where you need to have a lot of the technical components on point. And with how intense the races are, from the beginning of the season, you really have to have a high level of fitness, and you try to hold that as long as you can. So you need to have that mix of getting the endurance miles in, but also having that intensity and the technical proficiency, right when the season goes. So, cross is certainly here.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you brought that up about the intensity and the specificity and the technical aspect. And when you say that, I'm assuming you're talking about your technical, like sharpened pencil, crossing barriers, getting through sand, exploding up hills. Because I enjoy your podcast In the Red, and you've been talking about how to prep for the season, and sharpening the saw in the areas that are specific to cross and are not really used on the road or gravel roads or really even mountain biking. It's its own discipline.
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
go for it.
The series we're doing is called, it's a 4-episode mini-series called hashtag Cross is Coming. And the goal was to really share whatever pointers I could and kind of take listeners through what my progression is going into the season. So the early part of the cross prep it's not your best form. You're kind of operating at a 75% level where it's a lot of it is you need to get a group together. It's following the wheels, learning from each other, laughing with your training partners, and to have that camaraderie is huge. And just getting the steps back. So if you think about something as basic as a dismount and remount in barriers, you can't expect to be at a sprinting pace having proficient skill right off the gate when you haven't done these skills for 6 months, or less than that if you race through February. So the point is to just ease into the skills and kind of get the muscle memory back, because a lot may have changed through the summer. Your position may have changed. You may have changed equipment, all these small things. So getting the muscle memory back kind of at that walking pace or jogging pace, your dismount, remount, your shouldering, your bunny hopping, your ruts, your cornering, all that stuff. And then you slowly build the speed back up to it. When you get the good muscle memory back, you start to get kind of everything dialed in at a lower speed, and then you just slowly increase the speed and the intensity. And by the time you're middle of August, you really should be in full swing with trying to, be really, you should have most of your skills in check, and then you can start to add the intensity.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I'll use that to plug our weekly cross practice Tuesday nights at parks around the central Iowa area. We're not sure where we're having them yet. That's not a signed deal yet, but it really is super beneficial to come, and we set a little 1.5K course up with flags, put some barriers out. You can follow wheels, you can take the tight corners, you can hit some sand, just do loops around the barriers, or even just go in the middle of the field, dismount and mount, and slowly pick up speed. And we do that every single week to help people hone those skills, and it's great. But I really love your series. Again, we're 2 parts into your 4-part series.
Correct.
And
yeah.
One of the things, like, I loved, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago at one of the Trek CX Cups, Sven was there doing a workshop on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning or whatever. It was probably Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was even Friday afternoon. I don't know. But he had these people who I mean, some were on mountain bike. Like they were not all pro cyclocross racers. It was a huge variety. 12-year-old kids, 48-year-old moms, cross bikes, mountain bikes, whatever people had, they brought. And he's got them lined up like 10 feet from the base of the flyover,
Yep.
dead stop. And he's like, go. And then he's just yelling, explode, explode, explode. And I was like, holy crap. Like, that is super duper hard. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're exploding. I think it was your last episode. You're talking about Sven on a hill with his coach, explode, explode in 2002 or 2004 or whatever. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that firsthand, but I got a kick out of that. But your whole series, like seriously, if you want to, if you want to hone your skills on cross, tune into In the Red 100%. You're on all the podcast platforms, aren't you?
Oh yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Dave,
that,
I appreciate that, and it really is. It's not. Sven is one of the greatest. He is the greatest cyclocross star, and he's had a lot of following and a lot of content around him that kind of shows his preparation. But just because the best in the world does that drill doesn't mean it's unique to him. That is like the core fundamental component of sport. Like you have a hill, you go up and down the hill. Like how many sports does that exact drill? And what it does, you start at the base. There's the technical component of from a standing start, you have to clip in. With cyclocross, you have limited traction because you're limited to a 33 millimeter tire. So you have to maintain your small traction patch. So you need to shift your body weight in a way to where you're not sliding out the rear. And you need to have extreme explosivity to get up and over this hill. And ideally, you're doing this on a hill that, 50-50. Maybe you make it up, maybe you don't. Maybe it's depending on the conditions or just the steepness of the difficulty. But it requires a lot of explosiveness and also the right technique to do it. And if you can dial both in, then like that's the ultimate drill. So we do talk about that when we talk about a couple other drills to do, some structure within your cyclocross training. But the one thing you kind of touched on, I think one of the most important things for really any sport is to be training around other athletes. Athletes need other athletes to train with and to learn from and to grow with too. That's just it's the most basic part of sport. You can't do everything alone. Like, that's what it's like to be a triathlete. Maybe I don't mean to be shitting on triathletes.
I could go there
but
for sure.
but
No, 100% get it. I got stories.
but the reason I'm kind of ragging on triathletes is that you look at the transitions between the run or the bike or the swim, or like some of these transitions or what these athletes do on the bike. You can definitely identify a lot of technical things. You're like, you need to try cyclocross. You need to just try doing a group ride first off, because you have a sport that's very numbers oriented, and that's a huge component of it. But at some point in any sport, you need to let go of the numbers, let go of the data, and just say, this is art, this is feeling. You need to know what your body is, and that is equally important to the data.
Yeah, 100%.
Sometimes it's more important, in my opinion. But
yeah, well, not just. I think this is an old recording with Dan Sota about that exact thing. He's like, it's not always about having a whistle and a stopwatch. Sometimes it's about having somebody to chase, or somebody chasing you, or somebody pushing you until. And we've all, if you haven't, you should be on a group ride where your freaking eyes are bleeding, your ears are bleeding, your tongue is like 5 miles back, laying on the ground, and you just can't go that hard on your own.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And I think group rides are one of the best things that athletes at any level can do. We all have to do our interval training, and sometimes that structure requires us to be on our own from time to time. But riding in groups with other athletes is extremely important. And I would recommend, if there's an opportunity, if you're an athlete at any level if there's an opportunity to join the group ride, I would choose the group ride and move your interval training to a day that, maybe there isn't the group ride. So you are able to be a part of that structure and just be a part of, in that environment. And then you do your intervals a day that, you're going to be solo, because I've seen a lot of athletes that, maybe we're doing a technical skills session that it's like, that's the time to be around other athletes. And they say, but my coach said I need to be doing 40/20s today. I need to be on the road, or I need to do this on the trainer. It's like, but you lose the benefit of being around your peers. That is so important. So I know that the data is important and doing your interval training is important. A lot of the measured work is important, but I do think that it is just as important, or sometimes more important, to be in the group and finding those moments where you're able to practice your skill with your peers. Art over data, so to
I
say.
love it. I love it. That's
Art
why
over
you
science.
that's why you are so old, wise, and mature in this sport.
Well, I'm only 28.
I know.
I'm
I'm pulling
29
it
next
up, and
month.
you're talking to Dan, and you're like, I'm so old and mature in the sport, and I was like, dude, you're 28.
So Don and I have grown up really. I think he's 1 year older than me, but we grew up through the sport, like through the junior categories, through the under 23s, and into the pros. Like we've been in and around the same circles for really the last 12, 13 years. I think, yeah, somewhere in and around there. But it definitely feels like a long time, and there's a lot of things that I've learned, and I do feel like I have a lot of experience. But in that same breath, I feel like there's a lot of things that I've yet to do or to learn.
Yeah. Well, you still have time left. Trust
Yeah,
me. Is
plenty.
there any gray in that head of hair of yours?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're not going to
I'm
look
just
too close.
I haven't even bothered to look. I'm just trying to push that problem away.
Dig it. I love it. Well, we haven't really introduced you. For those who don't know, I do have a lot of folks who ride gravel, a lot of folks who ride road, a lot of folks who ride recreationally
Mhm.
who listen. I'm talking to three-time Pan Am champion in cyclocross, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like you're kind of like Cassie Nui Odoma, who was famous for always getting second until she didn't.
And yeah, we are actually happy to get that second place. Yeah, our tactic went smoothly through the race, so no bad feelings about it. So actually we're happy, and yeah, being second behind the world champ is also something cool.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So you are her because you just kept getting second forever
Oh my gosh,
until
yeah.
you didn't. And then you win the national championships. I love it. Stars and stripes forever, baby.
I know, yeah.
Uh, 2023 national cyclocross champion, Curtis White, riding on the Steve Tilford Foundation and supported by Pa Normal and Trek, and is just always a delightful face at the cyclocross traveling circus. So again, welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. That's who we're talking to is Curtis White.
Well,
Brother,
thank you very
can
much.
I read something? Can I read this?
Certainly.
I pulled up Wikipedia, and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read this. Curtis White, born 1995 in Schenectady, New York, is an American professional cyclist. Do you know what I'm going to read here? Do you know
No,
what this says?
to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen my Wikipedia page.
Well, hang on, man. Keep listening. Who currently rides for Steve Tilford Foundation Racing.
Mhm.
All this other stuff I mentioned, and here's the next sentence. He is the brother of former racing cyclist Emma White. How is Emma? Emma was always a delight in that cyclocross traveling circus.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are always trying to get Emma back to cyclocross, but the running joke is, and if you go around to the cycling scene, you'll probably get about a dozen people who say that they came up with this joke first. But the running joke is that I'm better known as Emma's brother rather than Curtis.
It's on Wikipedia.
I know, but it is funny to think about how many people have tried to take credit for that joke. But Yeah. So my sister Emma and I grew up. I found cycling first, and I'm the oldest of five. Emma came uh, next into the sport. I have two other sisters that never really found cycling. They were athletes in their own way. And then Harrison, the youngest of the five, also came into cycling. I
Hmm.
always thought that Harrison was the most gifted or the most talented of us in the sport. I mean, technically, he was really good. He was very strong, but I think um, he stopped racing a few years ago. Emma went from racing road and cyclocross. She raced with Rally and then Human Powered Health for a number of years. There were a couple of years we were teammates on Rally as well as Cannondale Cyclocross World. So we were kind of in and around each other's worlds for a lot of our careers. And then she morphed into more racing on the track and then pursued that. Was world champion in the team pursuit, and then went on to the Olympics in Tokyo, where she got a bronze medal in the Olympics with the U.S. team. So she really had an interesting trajectory, and I think it goes to, I mean, that if we're just talking about cyclocross and how dynamic of a sport that is, I mean, you can't. I mean, it's really difficult to find a race podium at the professional level, men and women, where no one has raced cyclocross.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it,
Yeah, you're right about that.
there are a lot of people that have cyclocross in their background, whether they've stuck with it or not. Cyclocross has been an excellent development opportunity for athletes on the track, on the road, on the mountain bike, um, a little on the gravel, but not so much.
Oh, I don't know.
But
I feel like there's a bunch
it
of
really,
gravel. I feel
there's a
like
couple. There's a couple that have gone that direction, but I mean,
there are.
physiologically, that the demand is quite a bit more, and very different for gravel. But
Yep.
I mean, if you look at what cyclocross does from a power profile, I mean, it's really not the best. I mean, when you're tracking racing and reading the data, it's not the best thing to look at the power. I find it a little bit more beneficial to look at the heart rate, but
Mm.
the when we're talking about Sven Nys at the base of a hill doing a deep seated power sprint up this steep hill, there's the technical component and the power component, and then you look at track on a fixed gear. The first 20 seconds of a team pursuit, you're winding up this massive gear to what speeds are they at? 50, 60 kilometers an hour?
Yeah,
Like
fast. Yeah.
faster than that. Like you need that. Like she got that skill from cyclocross. Emma got that skill from cyclocross, 100%, and carried that with her onto the track.
Hmm.
So
And Tacoma World Championship has a rainbow jersey and a bronze medal in the Olympics. That's pretty cool.
exactly.
There's certainly no shame in being labeled as Emma's brother.
No, I find no shame. A lot of pride.
Yeah, for sure. She's doing well, I assume.
Yes, yeah.
Good.
She's still involved with cycling in some capacity. She still does some coaching and she comes to the races and she misses it to a degree, but she's enjoying her life after sport now. So I'm the last one holding on to the dream at the moment.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that you are, and I want to talk about that. And you're one of the people I want to talk to about that because you are one of the guys who has really continued to make cyclocross their main focus. And I know you race on the road and you've done some gravel and you still throw some gravel in here and there, but cyclocross is it. Cyclocross is why you race bikes. And I mean, so many people kind of have moved on and have moved on to whatever. You mentioned it's hard to find a podium where somebody who raced cross isn't on that podium. But I mean, look at Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, Pidcock, Marianne Vos, Blockavance, uh, Lucinda Brand had a freaking awesome Tour de France, right? And
Mhm.
uh, two-time world champ in cross. Um, so it's a great road to the road. Um, but I don't know. I look at the U.S. scene, and I'm only looking at the U.S. scene. And we had the World Championships in 2013, and then we had the World Championships here in 2023, 10 years later.
Yep.
And I interviewed Stephen Hyde. I think you've met him.
Once or twice.
Once or twice. And I was like, Hyde, were those bookends or is it a stair step? Are we continuing to go up the stairs? Or were those two world championships the bookends? And then we get the news that there's no World Cup in the U.S. this year. And I know Trek came up with the U.S. CX 4 race series, and then there's the United States Cyclocross Professional Series. But certainly there's no World Cup here, and I mean, we talked about the state of cross in the green room, but how do you feel about the state of cross right now, and where is it? Where has it come from, and where should it go?
Yeah, I think currently we're in a pretty unique position, to say the least. And I believe I'm the only athlete only American athlete that was there and racing for both the Louisville World Championship. I was a second year junior, and then in Fayetteville, both American hosted World Championships. So, I mean, I've been around the sport a long time. I really wasn't. I mean, I've raced several USGPs as a junior. I never really did it as a professional, or in the elites. So, but I knew the impact that the USGP had back in the day. The one thing I will say, when a lot of people talk about the height of American cross was the USGP. We didn't have an American World Cup when the USGP was around. The USGP really elevated the sport. So everyone who was behind the scenes promoting that series built that scene up. And the characters who were racing at the time it was easy to get behind. The World Cups that we had years later after the Louisville World Championship, that was incredible to see, just to experience that day. And then the World Cup started coming to the US. Like, I remember when, I think it was Milton Keynes was the first World Cup to be outside of mainland Europe. And that was hosted in the UK. Like that was a
Hardly
big deal.
Outside of mainland Europe.
You're
Like a 22-minute boat ride.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, you just go through a tunnel and you're there. But right. I mean, but that was a huge jump forward in the sport. And then the World Cup came to Las Vegas. And then we had, a couple short years later, we had, Iowa, and then Trek, and then Fayetteville. So, I mean, there was the year that there was 3 World Cups in a week. I mean, that was incredible racing. It's a shame to not see a World Cup come back to the States now that we've had World Cups for so long. But I think I have to get a lot of credit to the USCX when that series first came around. I think we had the US Cup before that. That was only a 1-year edition. And the biggest thing that we want in the series is longevity. It's consistency. Being able to provide a consistent product for people to get behind, to get excited about, that promotes the athletes and provides high quality racing. And I think that, what are we now? We're in year 4 of the USCX, and they're doing that. I think, they're going to be the first 4 weeks of the season. So already we're talking about, to come into the cyclocross season, you need to have your technique and your skills and your intensity. Like, everything needs to be in check. Now more so, because our national series runs from, I think it's September 14th to October 6th.
Yep.
Like, that's very early. And, the season used to start a little later than that. So you really can't ride into form in the season. You have to show up ready to go. And these are races with media attention. So this is what we have right now. And we have to go to these races and perform at a high level. And between Roanoke, Rochester, Baltimore, and Waterloo, those are the 4 weekends that have the highest level of production in the US, and they have the most going into it. And it's nice to have the consistency with Trek supporting it. Now they're pivoting from the World Cup in Waterloo to being the closing round of the USCX. So the one thing I will say is there's a big gap between the USCX, we have Pan Ams in November. We have a number of races so after that is, I'm just going off of my, off the top of my head in the US. First 4 weeks of the USCX, then we have Major Taylor in Indianapolis, which is a C2 C2. We have Cincinnati, which is a C1 C2. Then we have Falmouth as a C1 C2 weekend. Then we go out to Missoula, Montana for the Thunderdome, and is a Saturday, and then Sunday is Pan Am's. So that's Continental Championships are huge. That's, you have the same points as a national championship, I believe. So big UCI points is an automatic selector for the World Championships for the U.S. And I mean, all countries do that with their Continental Championships. There's a C2 weekend in Colorado after that. Then we have Nash Dash in Georgia, and then North Carolina GP. And then you have a 3-week gap until the national championships, and that's our season. But there really isn't a lot of, like, they're just one-off races through October and November. So there really isn't that serious component that stretches over the entire season that has that storyline. The storyline's the first 4 weeks, and then you have Continental Championships and then the national championships. So kind of targeting what races to do between then and to have that excitement. The World Cup, the biggest change now with the World Cup is it's being pushed back until the end of November. So you have, I think, 12 rounds within a 2-month period or a 2-month and a week somewhere.
Yeah, which is
so. I mean, which you could make the argument that there is good flow to the season. You have the USCX, you focus on Pan Ams, you select the races that you want to go to around that. You have the national championships, and then you get to focus on the World Cups, which is great.
Yeah. You like that? That works out well for you?
Yeah. I mean that's the logical flow to the season. And, it's nice to know that you're not missing World Cups, and at the beginning of October.
To go to Rochester.
Well, or like Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Those are ones that kind of conflict. But now there's kind of like a centralized focus around, you get to do all the C1s, you target all the C1s in the States after the USCX Pan Ams. Maybe you go to Georgia or to North Carolina. Perhaps you focus on the first 2 World Cups. I think it's Antwerp and Dublin are the first 2.
Yep.
And then you come back, focus on nationals, then you go back over for the cursed period, and then you're running to worlds. So there's decent flow to it. But that's kind of what the state of it is right now. There isn't, like the USGP days, there isn't a 2.5-month storyline that culminates in, the end of November, right before, or the very beginning of December, right before our national championships. It's all very front loaded.
It is front loaded. Do you think that will attract some of the Euro guys to come over and do those 4 races and kind of build their resume with UCI points early in the season?
I hope so. You have 4 C1, C2 weekends. And while there is a bit of travel, you go down to Roanoke, Virginia. You come up to Rochester, New York, then down to Baltimore, Maryland, then over to Waterloo, Wisconsin. I mean, it's quite possible to drive it all. And a lot of these guys will rely on host housing. So they'll talk to the promoters and say, hey, we're coming over. We want to make this block work. Do you know of a local family that would be willing to host us? Which is very common in the cycling world. Like, that's what we would always do on the road, and sometimes with cross. It's not as common, but it's what we do, and it's really unique. Like, I've always loved doing that because you get to meet new people. They welcome you into their home, which is incredibly gracious of them, and they're very curious about your story, where you're from, what do you do, what is the sport. Maybe they're familiar with cycling or cyclocross, and maybe they're not. So I always found that incredibly unique, but that makes the barrier like a little bit more manageable for those guys to come over. The one thing we were talking about is that there isn't a World Cup for them to come over for anymore.
Right.
But it is quite possible to do that. And I hope some of those guys do come over, because it elevates the quality of racing. You look at the USCX last year, those early rounds before the first World Cup, it was like, it was crazy. We had different winners all the time, and the group was shaken up, and there was drama, and it attracted a lot of people,
Hmm.
and it excited people.
Yeah. Do you think if they don't come over, do you think that will hurt your efforts to, as you dive into the World Cups and the World Champs
I,
eventually?
I mean, it doesn't really impact me that much in that way, I think, because we still have real high quality racers. I think you look at the recent trajectory of an Andrew Strohmeyer, who's
Hmm.
now out of the under 23s, had a really strong campaign last year as a last year under 23, but he won a couple races and was really at a high level. uh, I assume he'll be shaking it up. Same with a Scott Funston or an Eric
Hmm.
Bruner. They're still real good racers, and we're going to be throwing down. I expect them to be on their best form, and I hope to bring mine. If there's a couple European guys that are able to go into the mix, like that's great. That's more excitement. That ups our level, but I do think we have high level racers that will push each other here.
Yeah, which is good and what you need. And one of the things I have always heard you dig about the World Cups. It's pushes you beyond, just like we talked about the group rides, when makes your ears bleed and your eyeballs pop out. Like that's kind of what you want when you're racing towards the curse period around Christmas, and then eventually, obviously, the World Championships
Yeah.
and national championships. Of course, you want to be on point for that too. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get the jersey back, and I feel like it's within my reach. I feel like last year it was the honor of my career to represent that jersey. I have a few regrets about how the season went. Really, with my preparation, I was focusing more on my training for these longer gravel events in the summer, and I really felt like that impacted my explosivity, and I felt like there was a lot of catch up through the season. So it was
Yeah, you talk a lot about gravel versus road racing as a prep for the cross season and gravel. And one of the things I find intriguing about not just the gravel season but the Lifetime Grand Prix is the variety in the races, from 200-mile rolling hills of Kansas to the punchy 2-hour Schwambigen mountain bike race. But then you'd whittle divide Schwambigen by two for hour-long max heart rate cross race, and I mean it's even that much more different from 200 miles through Kansas or 150 miles through Nebraska at Gravel Worlds or whatever. But yeah, those races are long, and you just kind of
and they're
charge
very
through them on
difficult to
your
recover from. That's the
yeah.
biggest component. There's one thing to train for the distance, but it's another thing to how am I able to recover from this and absorb that into fitness with the body, and have it not degrade you in a way, So
Right,
that's a
right.
big part, and there really isn't that speed component that cyclocross has. So we talked a bit about kind of the risk factor too in gravel. Like I love taking risks in sport. Like I there are a lot of things that if you can't do it 9 out of 10 times, don't do it in a race. But like when you have a national championship on the line, like when I was in Hartford, I risked riding an incredibly sketchy downhill off camber. One feature that most people were running all race. Nearly everyone was running, and I chose to ride that in the finale because I needed to figure out where's the difference made between me and Eric Bruner, and that was a risk. Sometimes you'll take risks in when the conditions are different. Like if it's a little slick out and it's rainy, you take a risk and you run Grifos, and because you want to have a faster rolling tire. In gravel, it's a bit different because you are kind of penalized for taking risks because it's this real self preservation discipline. You need to always look after your equipment. If you get a flat tire, you're losing the group. You're never going to see it again. Day's over. Goodbye. All that time and investment is gone. That's like, shit. Like, I don't really like, there's a physical component of preparing for it, and then you have to change your physiology. I really do think that it's a multi-year process of changing your physiology to be adapted to 5 hours at 330 watts or 300, whatever you have to push. It's really like tempo threshold all day long until you can't eat enough or you just get popped.
Yep.
And cyclocross is just different because if you make a mistake or you have a mechanical, half lap later, there's a pit and you can salvage the effort, or you race again tomorrow. It's just like that. There's that component to it that I think like that the barrier isn't as high. It requires not the barrier isn't as high. Although that's a good cyclocross pun, I
That was a
guess.
good cyclocross pun. I'm pretty. Are you a dad yet? You're 28.
No, I'm not, but I could tell that it's coming. But yeah. So it requires gravel requires a lot more. Kind of what we're joking around about triathletes. A lot more fixation on the numbers and the data, and just that time in one zone. And you're like,
Yeah. Yep.
There isn't the spontaneity to it. Like some of the races are great. Like, Steamboat is different from Unbound versus Schwamigan or whatever, but it's a completely different discipline, and it's really difficult. I found it really difficult to recover from those efforts.
Yeah.
So one reason why I always cyclocross is where my passion is. Excuse me. And I just that's where my body's best suited for. I like that effort more.
Well, I love that you're hanging in there. So many, I don't know about so many, but a lot of people definitely have jumped from gravel. Even Bruner was national champ and then chose to not attend the World Championships so he could train for the Lifetime Grand Prix. And he's seems to be back now. He's not in the Lifetime Grand Prix now, and I think he'll be giving you a headache in cross races this year. At least I hope so.
I hope so
But
too.
uh, cross feels different than it did 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 4 or 5 years ago. And I don't know. I'm just curious why cross is super fun. I should ask you, why is cross awesome?
I think specifically with cyclocross because it's the most versatile discipline in cycling. If you look at like growing up, we always called them endurance cross rides, which is what gravel is now. You put your cross bike, you took your cross bike and you just explored, and you were on trails that you're under biking sections, which means the trails are like mountain bike trails, and you're riding a cross bike, and it's all about wheel placement and the technical component. In the races, it's really intense. You have to have all these tools in the toolbox. You have to be good in all these different conditions. You need to know your equipment. The character component of it, you're freezing your ass off, you're covered in mud, and you're carrying your bike up a hill. Like it's just I don't know. I mean, you really have to have as many tools in the toolbox as you can. And I always found like the interaction was between spectators and racers was always very unique. That's the thing I love. Gravel racing, it's not a spectator sport really. It's a participation sport, which is great. But I don't think it's any secret that that's where the industry is going, because that's where they're selling the most bikes.
Correct.
And that's why they're kind of stepping away a little bit from cross. But I really think that from a character standpoint and a racer development, cyclocross is the best discipline that you can do.
So I think you just explained why people should go to a cross race to participate. Why should they go to watch, to spectate?
It's why should you go to watch? I think it's just unique. Like you get to bring a cowbell and you ring it in people's faces for an hour, and there's a regular cadence in races all day long. So you get to cheer on, if you're there for a masters race or a junior race or the elites, there's a cadence and a break between all the events and kind of this crescendo through the day. And you get to the fastest races last. When you go to a USCX race, let's say, uh, all the team tents and trailers are lined up. We all have rider cards. I'll be selling, t-shirts and hoodies at some of these races or hats. Like there's great interaction between the racers and everyone that's there to watch. The early races, September, the weather's usually good, but you put on your mud boots or your hiking boots and some Gore-Tex pants, and you come out in November, December, and you watch a mud fest. Like what's not to love?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit all of the nails on the head. You're exactly right. It's such a intimate relationship all day long because we're all hanging out there all day long because there's races going on all day long. Are hand-ups a crime, Curtis? Are hand-ups a crime?
Ha ha ha. No, to be honest, I don't really. I haven't really ever done any hand ups. I think I've taken the occasional dollar bill. Because
Really? I was going to ask what's the most unique hand-up you've ever taken?
I would say probably a dollar bill, but you got to be careful. If you just go for the single dollar, it's not a good payday. You need I mean, ideally you go for the Benji, right? You got to go for the $100 bill, but there's not a lot of folks. I mean, inflation's high, prices are, people got to work hard. They're not no one's giving out $100 bills for free. So it's a lot of fives, maybe a 10 if you're lucky. But
Who do we watch this year? Who do we get excited about following this year? Why should people in the U.S. be excited? I mean, besides Curtis White and Emma, is Emma coming?
Not to race.
I'm kidding.
I think there's still real high quality racing in the U.S. I think, a favorite of mine, especially on the women's side, is Magali Rochette. She's one of the most personable athletes that we have. That's just always out there, always smile on the face. Last year, she did a very unique thing at the USCX series where after each race, I think it was probably like a Saturday evening after the Saturday races, she stayed behind and did like a Q&A session. And I was lucky enough to join her in Falmouth, and everyone hung around the beer tent. There was pizza, and I mean, there was probably a couple hundred people that were there. I hope I'm not exaggerating too much, but it was a real treat. And every once in a while, you'll get an event where people hang out. They do something really interactive like that. And Magali is always at the forefront and very, very thoughtful with some of that stuff. So
plus she has this awesome French Canadian accent.
Yeah. Yeah. And she also has a great podcast, Fever Talk. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'll follow that too. But an incredible advocate for the sport, incredible athlete, always puts on a show, very interactive. So that's something I think a lot of people should be excited about on the women's side. And then I think we'll have some really exciting battles on the men's side. So everyone's kind of, for if you're thinking about Eric Bruner, Scott Funston, Andrew Strohmeyer, and myself, we've all kind of kept our distance through the summer. We've all kind of stayed where we are locally and done our preparation quietly, let's say. Like I've been doing more road racing. Strohmeyer's down in the Baltimore area. Boulder is home to Funston and Eric. So I think they've kind of been doing their own preparation out there, and I'm doing my thing. And then September is kind of, Stephen Hyde always kind of said, like, school's in session in September. Now it's time to see who did their homework. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the unique part about every season. So I think it's going to be a lot of exciting racing coming up.
What do you think will happen at the Trek CX Cup?
What do I think? Well, I hope I win the series there. That's what I hope happens. Sorry?
Does the money get you excited? Like, is that enough? I think there's $7,500 each for men and women for the 8 race series, 4 weekend series.
No, I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, everyone needs to pay their bills. We all have rent and taxes and bills, and and we're very fortunate to call ourselves professional athletes. So when we have something like that, I've won the series the last 2 years, and yeah, that's a component. We want to be valued. But it really is just, we want to put on a good show and to win that title. And now that the series has been around for 4 years, there's a consistency factor. It means something to win it. So that's the part I'm excited about.
Yeah. Should people be excited to go to Trek? Do you think Trek will still bring in some of the?
Yeah, oh yeah, certainly. I mean, if you look at the Chicago cyclocross scene and the Milwaukee cyclocross scene, um, it's pretty cool. So the Trek Cup has always had a pretty cool party. They always had Friday Friday racing. Saturday has kind of been an expo day or amateur racing, and Sunday's been the World Cup. The schedule changes this year where Saturday is the C1, Sunday is the series finale. We may not be getting Ili Iserbyt and Tone Arts, but we're still gonna have. I mean, they know how to throw a good party. They're still gonna have the secret bar in the back, giving haircuts between races. There's still gonna be, I don't know, the Legends race. I think,
I'm sure.
all the cows that they have, that unique feature. So it's always it's a nice course. There's a good flow to the event, and they know how to put on a good party. So
Yeah. Dig it. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. You're riding a Trek, so that's going home for you.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, certainly Trek
and
Boone.
yeah, you love it.
I do, yeah, and so for me, I came from 9 years on Cannondale Cyclocross World, and I really saw a 9 year evolution of what the Cannondale technology and the geometry was like, and it was great to get to know that product. And then when I went from, and you could kind of tell like the bike was getting a bit more like, it was meant for comfort a bit more, and that's not
Hmm.
always what cyclocross is. You're, because you are limited with the tools you have underneath you. You're limited to a 33 millimeter tire. You need a bike that's very responsive, that you can bunny hop, jump on and off of, swing around ruts. Um, there's no suspension system. Your body is the only suspension system that you have. So your body needs to be incredibly stable, and to take that impact, to have this the durability to have variable cadences throughout a race. Sometimes it's, if you look at the World Cup on for a number of years, it's 50 RPMs, just max power, like
Oof.
just slogging through a mud field. You're on and off the bike. When you're on the bike, it's real low cadence power. And then it's just, I don't know, maybe 10 dismounts each lap, just because running is faster than riding. You need that skill, or the
Yep.
extreme speed and explosivity. Like, you need to have that variability. So when I switched from a Cannondale to the Boone, I felt like, oh my God, I'm back on a true cyclocross bike. Like,
Oh,
this
wow.
is what it means to be, like, to have a bike that's truly responsive. And the Boone is, from there, when they started working with Sven, and then they're working with the Balois team for a number of years, they certainly value that input, and that they are a true cyclocross specific focused team. So they value that product, and to be on that bike has been great over the few years, because that really is like a real sharp, responsive cyclocross bike that you can certainly race gravel on. Like, you put the double rings on, it can fit 40 mil tires, and it's a great, yeah. So
Uh,
it's a sharp bike. I love it.
yeah. Well, that's great to hear. I do race gravel on my Crockett, but I did put fatter tires on it. It holds 45s, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah. I mean, you need to have the clearance too, because even with the 33 millimeter tires, like, if you get a race that's, you're like totally caked up, like the Limas is with mud, it's like, oh my God, like, you can't have the tires rubbing against the frame.
For
So
sure.
that
For
that's
sure.
where, like, you need to have that more clearance, which is good when you're racing cyclocross, and that it also allows for, some adventure tires for the summer. So
Yep. Yep. No doubt. Um, so you've got your little podcast in the red, and we've got a Bivo bottle to give away.
yeah, certainly. And so the one thing I will say is, so I started working with Bivo this year, and they're a really unique company. They make an eco-friendly stainless steel bottle that fits your bike cages. And you may think like, well, it may, it sounds a little heavier. And yeah, while it may be a little heavier than the traditional plastic bottle, it's not by much, but it's much easier to clean. You're not going to be throwing away a plastic bottle because it gets a little moldy. It's easier to clean. Their free flow, like when you put the bottle upside down, their free flow technology is really easy to use. But my favorite feature really is their insulated bottles, especially through the summer where we dealt with some really extreme temperatures and humidity. And when you're training, you're riding, if your body temperature goes too high, you're cooked. You're done. Like it's really difficult to recover. So regulating your body temperature during your efforts is crucial for performance, for taking on stress, and your recovery. So that's really my favorite feature with the Bivo bottles, specifically their insulated bottles. And then I'm really looking forward for the winter, where if it gets too cold, I'm able to put some, I don't know, maybe some hot cider in the bottles. I think that'll be good. And they hold their temperature for quite a while, which is really important. So we do have a free bottle to give away.
We do. What are we going to do?
Well, let's make a little trivia out of it.
Okay.
Right?
Let's
do a little trivia. So here are the rules. On Instagram, if you share this episode and you tag both Dave and myself, Dave, how can they tag you?
Bike Talk with Dave on Instagram.
Okay. And if you could tag me at Curtis J. White, and if you share this episode and you listen to my last episode on In the Red and you give us the answer, here's the question. What athlete do we reference on a specific drill? There's one athlete we talk about. We talk about a specific drill where we include in our cyclocross preparation and we cite a video with it. It's pretty clear. There's only one athlete that we talk about in that context.
All right.
You share this episode, tag Dave and myself, and give us the answer, and we'll ship you. The first one to give us this answer, we'll ship this Bivo water bottle to you. And if you don't get it, we also, with working with Bivo, I do have a code for all your listeners. Hydrate with Curtis, no caps or spaces. That'll get you free shipping on any product at Bivo. You can go to drinkbivo.com and you can check out their full line of products.
We didn't even talk about, and one of my main question was the Olympic effect, because it is August and it is hot. Just quick, what do you think of cyclocross in the Olympics, either in summer or winter?
Well, I think it makes more logistical sense for the summer because cyclocross is incredibly variable. I think if you listen to the CX Harris podcast, they'll always say, well, what is cyclocross weather? The weather in which you race cyclocross,
Correct.
But we always do hold on to that. Like, we're an off-season sport. We're a winter sport. Between the World Championships and between the Road World Championships and the Tour Down Under, there's next to no competition for events that we're going up against. It's cyclocross that time of year, and there's only cyclocross racing to watch. So we do take a lot of pride in that. If you look at the World Cup that they've done in Val di Sole, the last few years, it's 100% ice and snow. And that provided a really interesting template. I will say during the Olympics that there was an interesting conversation that was sparked in the Belgian and Dutch media, where they thought it was, like 95% positive that cyclocross will be included in the 2030 Olympics.
Oh my, that's a long ways away.
Yeah, well, it is a long ways away. And if you think about how big the Olympics are, they do need to plan far enough in advance for including sports like that.
A long ways away.
But either way, that would change the landscape of the sport if cyclocross was in the Olympics. From a funding perspective, for involvement from sponsors and brands, industry attention, everything would change.
Yeah, I think it would too. LA, flag football or cyclocross?
Oh, cyclocross.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, when I had flag football, I was like, really? Come on. Like, why isn't cross in there?
The ultimate move would be if cyclocross was in both winter and summer Olympics, because we do race in both conditions, and it would stick to the true. That would just be like that would be out of this world. But the one thing I will say is watching, particularly the mountain biking, both the women's and the men's side. See Haley Batten and that, and then the two guys up there too. Like the level of which both the men and women are competing at, and having historical performances. Just from a fan of the sport, that really makes me excited for LA. And I coach a young athlete. His name's Henry Coote. He's a second-year junior. He's over with the U.S. national team now, preparing for the World Championships in Andorra. And seeing young athletes come up and seeing older athletes succeed at that stage, and seeing how motivated younger athletes are, like that's probably the coolest part for me. Like, I'm not a mountain biker. I do ride the mountain bike, but not at that level, obviously. I used to race on the road as well with a number of teams, not at the World Tour level, but still, I mean, I was teammates with Sept and Brendan McNulty on Rally. I raced with a number of those guys on the national team as well. So like, I know of them. I know how hard they work, and I know the level that they're at. It's truly inspiring. So to see successes at that stage, and then you have Olympics coming to the US, just as a fan of the sport, oh man, like I'm that makes me really excited to just as a fan.
Yeah. And I would love to hear you talk like that about cyclocross in the Olympics, because it would do the same thing. Like, it would lift cyclocross in the way that people would be excited in the way that you just described. 100%.
The one hope I have, if cyclocross ever makes it to the Olympics, is that Bob Roll does not commentate the cyclocross race.
Who does?
I'm a fan. I know he's been around. He's an iconic voice, but you know what? We need to get someone who knows a little bit more about cyclocross to commentate that. That's all I'll say.
Two things. One, in his broadcast booth, he is the young pup for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, we can have Phil Liggett. We can have Phil Liggett because he's got some one-liners.
I bet you he raced cyclocross in like 1968.
Oh man, maybe 1948, maybe.
maybe even 1948. I saw Bob Roll win the Vail Criterium in probably, I don't know, 1986 in the Coors Classic.
Yes.
So that's my big connection to Bob Roll.
Oh, cool.
But he's been around a long time for sure. Who would commentate? Who would you want commentating your cyclocross Olympic?
I think the GCN combo that we've had for a number of years, Jeremy and Marty. They ping pong off each other really well. I don't know. Maybe I'll develop as a commentator over the next 4 years, and maybe I'll have a shot.
But, I don't know. You should probably be more open about your conversational skills and be willing to talk here and there.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I still have a couple of years to develop, so we'll see.
That's right. Yeah, because I don't know. You're young. You are definitely.
Yeah.
All right, man. Good luck this season. Best of luck. Have fun. Sharpen the saw on your stuff. Can't wait for In the Red episode 3 and 4 of your training series to come out, and we'll look forward to people sharing this episode and answering our trivia question.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Dave, really appreciate you having me on. Thank you everyone for listening, and it really is a treat to always talk about cyclocross, and something I'm passionate about. And cyclocross is not coming. Cyclocross is here. If you're not out in the woods practicing your skills, get out there, do it tomorrow, do it Wednesday, or do it whenever. Join a group and make it happen. It's here.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.